Hello, this video will demonstrate how the current to/from school pupil transportation formula functions and what data sources are utilized in the formula. Let's begin. The first step in calculating the to/from school pupil transportation formula is getting the expenditures from the Annual Financial Report, or AFR, for function 2700, Student Transportation Services. Since we are reviewing the calculation for the current fiscal year 2018, I am utilizing expenditures from fiscal year 2016, as this is the most recent data set I have at the time I prepared this formula. This data is utilized to calculate the state's average cost per mile and minute. To calculate these costs, we divide object codes listed in row 6 into 3 buckets: a miles bucket, a minutes bucket, or an in-lieu bucket. Everything highlighted in orange is included in the total statewide cost for miles. Everything included in or highlighted as green is included in the statewide cost for minutes. And everything highlighted in blue is included in the in-lieu calculation, which will be utilized later on in this formula. You'll also note that some object codes do not have a highlight above them. These object codes are excluded from the calculation. The first one is 100, other salaries. These are salaries that are paid to personnel of a temporary nature, substitutes, aides, custodians who part of their job is cleaning up the transportation office or garage. The next category that is excluded is 300, purchased professional and technical services. These are services that are performed by only persons with specialized skills or knowledge, like an attorney or an auditor. These services can't directly be tied to to/from transportation, so they're excluded. The next object code is 500, other purchased services. These are amounts paid for services rendered by organizations or personnel not on the payroll of the LEA. Therefore, they're excluded. The next one is 511, services from other LEAs. These are transportation services from another LEA within the state. Basically, it's a reimbursement of services, and that is also excluded. The next one is 519, other student transportation services. By nature, that one is excluded also. The next object code that is excluded is 700, other property. This is for expenditures for acquiring capital assets, including land, buildings, or infrastructure. Of the 700 code, the only object code that is included is 730, equipment. 732, the purchases of school bus, is also excluded, as those purchases are not an allowable cost for the to/from formula. The next object code is 800, other objects. These are amounts paid to service debt, and for that reason that is excluded. Object code 810, dues and fines. These are basically expenditures paid for memberships. That is also excluded. All of these object codes can't be tied directly back or included in to/from for student pupil transportation. You'll also note at the bottom of this sheet, as we scroll down there, you'll see that there are 3 LEAs, Cache, Ogden, and Logan School District, that are excluded from the cost calculation of an average cost per mile and minute. That is because Ogden School District is excluded as it contracts with a third-party provider to pay for to provide its to/from transportation. Cache and Logan are excluded as Logan contracts with Cache to provide to/from transportation. We exclude both LEAs as we can't separate their miles and minutes by district to arrive at a cost per each. As we scroll back up to the top of this formula and then scroll to the right, you will see that in columns AW through AY, we are allocating benefits based on the salaries of included job categories. So for the mechanics, we allocate their benefits based on the mechanic's salary total. We allocate the bus drivers and others based on those salary totals for their benefits. And then lastly, we do the secretaries and their supervisors. So each benefit category is allocated based on the salaries for that related code. The next one, BA through BC, is miles total calculation, and BE through BG is the minute calculation, and column BI is in lieu. So if we look at BA, you'll see that this is the total miles, which is, it's adding up every column that has this orange highlighted above it to get a total cost for miles. We next bring in the total miles that were actually reported by LEAs. This is reported and collected on Form F. And let me bring that form up so you can see it. On this form, LEAs put in the serial number or VIN numbers of each bus they own, the bus number. The beginning odometer is actually taken from the ending odometer of the form from last year. The LEA then enters in the ending odometer amount, and the difference becomes the miles that were actually driven during that fiscal year. All of these miles in column I are totaled to come up to a total odometer reading, miles driven for that specific fiscal year. This number here is then inputted right here in BB. When we divide those two into each other, we get an average cost per mile per district. The minute amount in column BE is the total minutes of every green highlighted column. So this is the cost of everything associated to the minute bucket. When we get total minutes that are reported, this is coming from Form D. I will bring that form up. Form D is also Form F and D and C are all collected in July each year from your transportation directors. In Form D here, we get the total reported A1 report of total to from miles, or total to from minutes, excuse me. The next column down is the activity and field trip minutes, and the next one down is miscellaneous or other program minutes. The total of these three becomes the total minutes that are included right here in BF. When we divide these two, we get an average cost per minute per district. And then in column BI, we get the total in lieu reported, which is basically the total of the 5 columns that are highlighted in blue. As we scroll to the bottom of these columns, you'll see that we now have an average statewide cost per mile, which is $1.08, and an average cost per minute, which is 0.64 cents. We will use both of these two figures coming up when we try to calculate the to from transportation costs. The next step is to click on the final miles and minutes cap. This is where we're going to determine what the eligible miles are and what the eligible minutes are that will go into the final allocation. We start with the total odometer miles, which are calculated on Form F, which we saw on the last tab, which outlines the total miles based on the beginning and ending odometer reading for all buses in a district. I'll bring that up one more time just to show you. We're taking the difference between beginning and ending. That difference then comes into this total odometer, which is the total miles driven for that specific fiscal year. This is what then gets input in this field right here in C. The next field is all miles except A1 eligible. These are calculated based on the LEA's reported activities, field trips, summer, miles, other programs, repairs, training, and A1 and ineligible miles. These are reported each July on the Form C. I'll bring that up so we can see it. Form C, the LEA reports the total miles for activity trips for both elementary and right here for secondary. They also report for field trips elementary miles and secondary miles. Also reported is summer program miles, which goes here. Other program miles, which gets an explanation here in the comment field. Repair dead miles go here. Training miles are next. And then ineligible or half miles that are reported on the A1. All of these fields in yellow are totaled and then that total goes here in this field. Column number 3 is the possible to from miles. This is the difference between column 1 less column 2 gives me the product of column 3. Column 4 is the submitted fall 2016 A1 eligible miles without multi-purpose passenger vehicle miles. This is the actual audited miles from that the LEA submitted on their A1 report in the fall, meaning the miles have been adjusted for any audit adjustments that were noted or monitoring adjustments that were noted during USBE's review of their A1 reports. And so that total goes here. Number 5 is the difference between the possible to from miles reported on the Form C, which is their actual miles, and the miles reported on the audited A1 report, which is their estimate. So again, the A1 is submitted in the fall, and the Form C is submitted in the summer after that fiscal year has ended. The difference between those two is what's the amount that's in column 5. Column 6 is the percent difference between column 5 and column 1. So the difference between what percent the difference is between the miles reported on the C and the A1 to the total odometer. In column 7 is the 5% cap. If the variance in column 6 is greater than a negative 5%, then a yes goes in this column, meaning that the estimated miles on their submitted A1, which was column 4, was overstated by more than 5% when compared to the total odometer. Column 8, if a yes is marked in column 7, then the actual reported possible to from miles from Form C, which is in column 3, is inserted here instead of using the reported A1 miles from column 4. Column 9 then takes the multi-purpose passenger vehicles, and what those are any motor vehicle that has less than 10 passenger seats, which includes the driver's seat, that and cannot be certified as a bus. And these costs can be included in this calculation as long as they were incurred in transporting eligible students and the costs demonstrate efficiency. And so those are reported on the A1 also. So if LEAs have those, then those are put here. The last column is the total eligible miles. This is either the submitted A1 miles from column 4 plus any MPV miles in column 9 gets me the total miles, or if the district is capped in column 7, meaning they have a yes here, then the total miles are the actual reported miles off of the Form C plus any MPV miles from column 9. Either way, those are the total eligible miles, which will be used in the final part of the calculation. Now that we've calculated the eligible miles, we're going to scroll to the right and we're going to calculate the eligible minutes. So in column 11, this is the actual LEA submitted and reported total miles on the A1 report prior to any audit adjustments. Column 12 is the actual LEA submitted or reported total minutes on the A1 report prior to any audit adjustments. Column 13 is the ratio of miles from column 11 to minutes in column 12. Column 14 is the A1 eligible minutes. This is the actual audited minutes from the LEA submitted A1 report, meaning that the minutes have been adjusted for any monitoring adjustments that were noted during USBE's review of the A1 reports. Column 15 is the cap miles. As we determined in the other allocation here, if they were capped here in column 7 and they have a yes here, then they will also have a yes here in column 15. And this means that the actual reported or possible to from miles on the C form are utilized in the calculation instead of the A1 reported miles. So in column 16, if there's a yes here in column 15, Then again, we put the actual reported to from miles from the C form instead of the A1 reported miles. These are the same amounts as what was entered in column 8 over here. So column 7 and 8 are basically transferred and also put in column 15 and 16. Column 17 is the calculation of eligible capped minutes. If a yes is listed in column 15, then the miles listed on the C form are multiplied by the ratio calculated in column 13. If a yes is not listed, then the field remains blank. 18 is the difference. If there's a capped amount listed in column 17, then the difference is calculated between the calculation of eligible capped minutes, column 17, and A1 eligible minutes, column 14. If column 17 is blank, then column 18 will be blank. Column 19 is total eligible minutes. This is either the submitted A1 minutes, which are column 14 here, or if the district is capped in column 15, then it's the total eligible minutes calculated in column 17 here, times by, which this number is the eligible minutes in 16 times by the ratio in 13 again. So either here in 14 or the number in column 17 end up being the final minutes that are eligible in the to from formula. Again, this number will be used in the final step of the allocation next. Now we are on the last step of the formula. We are on the final allocation tab. Here you can see that we have the final eligible miles in column 2 and the final eligible minutes in column 3. Remember, these two amounts came from the final miles and minute cap. Right here is the final minutes, and right here are the final miles. Both of those numbers are then utilized here in these two columns. The next column, column 4, is the in-lieu total. This is the total of in-lieu that was calculated from the APR for function 2700 for object codes 513, 514, 515, 516, and 560. These were all highlighted on the average cost per mile and minute tab in blue. So these figures here are now used here. Column 5 is the estimated to from cost. This is the total submitted eligible miles, which is coming here from column 2, multiplied by the state's average cost per mile, plus the total eligible minutes in column 3, multiplied by the state's average cost per minute, plus any in-lieu total in column 4, gives me my total estimated costs. Remember that these statewide average costs were coming from the average cost per mile and minute tab at the bottom here. This is where we're pulling those from. The next column, column 6, is the prorated allocation. This is the total LEA estimated to from cost, which is column 5, divided by the total statewide estimate. As you can see, the total statewide estimate is $96.8 million. The total allocation I have for this portion is only $78 million. So therefore we have to prorate the allocation down. So we take each LEA's total divided by the statewide total at the bottom, and then times by the $78.2 million to get me what the LEA's portion of that share is. Column number 7 is the prorated allocation in column 6, divided by the estimated to from cost in column 5. As you can see here, all school districts currently are funded at 80.83% for fiscal year 18. Column 8 is the base that is in addition to the prorated allocation. The base is $30,000 and each LEA receives that. The total amount of the base for the state is $1.23 million. So the total allocation for LEAs is $79,472,476. If I take the $1.23 million off for the base, I arrive at the $78,242,476 allocation, which is prorated based on the estimated costs. Column 9 is the final to from school pupil transportation allocation. This is the prorated allocation from column 6 plus the base from column 8 to arrive at the total allocation. Column 10 is the estimated cost funded by the to from school pupil transportation allocation. This is the fiscal year 2008 final school pupil transportation allocation, which is from column 9, divided by the estimated to from costs in column 5. As you can see, school districts are funded anywhere from 81% to 205% for fiscal year 2018. We're now on the summary tab, which is the last tab in this workbook. As you can see, column 2 and 3 are the final fiscal year 2018 allocation and the percent of that was funded from the total eligible to from costs. If we click back on the final allocation tab, you can see that this is just a duplication of columns 9 and 10. The other thing to note here is that the total appropriation from the legislature for to from school pupil transportation is $83,730,200. Of that, statute tells us that we have to, from this allocation, take off the amount that's transferred to the Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind for their transportation, and the remaining amount is what school districts utilize in their to from calculation. As you can see, this amount is the same amount in the allocation here at the top. This concludes the tutorial on the pupil transportation calculation. I hope you found this beneficial. Thank you.